This story is titled The Man on the Roof. Hey, look, up there! I think someone is on that roof. They're gonna jump! Someone yelled from the sidewalk below. Finally, I have the attention of someone, Stan whispered to himself. It had been an exhausting and stressful week for him. Nothing had gone as he'd expected them to. It all started when his car refused to start on Monday morning. It had caused Stan to clock in late at the tech company Techtown, where he'd worked for the past 32 years. Stan had started working at the store right out of high school, when his plans to enter the military had grounded to a screeching halt after suffering a broken ankle 1 week into boot camp training. Stan had a knack for fixing electronics, and so, with no prospects for college, since he had never bothered to apply to any, certain that he would have gotten into the armed services, Stan did the next best thing. He applied to the only tech store in his hometown. There were only about 2,000 residents in the town. Stan's family had lived in the area on the same plot of land for about 4 generations, and following in their footsteps, he had never felt the need to relocate or move anyplace else, especially being an only child. Stan's great granduncle had started the company by building the town's first radio, which he did in a little shed at the edge of their property line, which he called his workshop. The uncle later went on to build the town's only satellite tower. Within a few years, word had spread to the nearby towns about the invention, subsequently putting the town on the map, and the rest, as they said, was history. Upon Uncle Clarence Gifford's passing, the store had been passed down to the next Gifford in line, his oldest son, who was younger than Stan and wanted nothing to do with the shop, so it was passed down again. Then again, after tragedy began to strike the family, taking them away one after another. But for some reason, Stan was never the next Gifford in line to take over the business. There was always someone else ahead of him. All credit to Clarence, who had fathered 19 children. Then just when Stan thought his time had finally arrived, around 9 months earlier, one of Clarence's great-granddaughter had showed up. The woman had been the only family member to have left their hometown to attend university halfway across the country. She had never bothered to return or even to send a postcard all those years. Then her grandfather, the now owner of the business, had taken ill, and she was next in line after him. Upon her return, she had announced that she had sold Techtown. The fact was, as the next Gifford in line to inherit the company after her grandfather, who was currently in a nursing home suffering from dementia, this young woman was well within her rights to do as she pleased. However, without any warning to Stan or anyone else in the family, she had resurfaced with this bombshell. According to her, the sale had already been finalized, and there was nothing anyone could do or say to change what had already been done. Upon taking over the company, the new boss had fired, or as he wanted them to think of it, set free, nearly all the older heads in the building. He had then replaced them with kids, younger than Stan's own granddaughter. Stan had a feeling that they had only kept him on because he was a Gifford, but he could tell that the new boss had it in for him from the very first day, for no other reason than he was a Gifford. What with all the talk of Techtown is moving in a new direction and anyone who could not keep up with the times should accept a severance and move on. Stan being the oldest at the company at 50, he knew that it was only a matter of time before he too was set free. Today was that day. As soon as he clocked in to work, there was a buzz over the intercom. He was wanted in Mr. Gerard's office. Mr. Gerard had replaced everything from the paint on the wall to the furniture in his great-uncle's old office with his own. This morning, Mr. Gerard sat in his big black overstuffed leather chair in the middle of the room, both feet on the edge of his shiny mahogany desk, with his legs crossed at the ankles and the door ajar. Stan rapped on the half-open door. You wanted to see me? Here, Mr. Gifford, come on in. Shut the door behind you. Mr. Gifford, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm afraid we would have to let you go. I'm sorry. After taking a shallow breath in, he continued, You should probably leave now before the store gets busy. We'll have your last paycheck hand delivered to you personally, along with a severance package that you're going to find very generous. Stan responded in a huff. Look, Mr. Gerard, I can explain. Mr. Gerard cut Stan off before he could complete his sentence. I'm sorry, Stan. It's not going to make a difference. The decision has already been made. With a sigh and a deep breath, Stan grumbled. Very well, then. As Stan made his way down the aisle, he could feel all eyes on him, like they already knew that he had just been canned. He could hear the whispers. Most likely they were all excited to see him gone. He had never befriended any of the new employees, and for good reasons. He knew that in the long run, it would be better that way, seeing as his days at Techtown were numbered. Truth be told, he had lasted a lot longer than he thought he would. But now that it had finally happened, he could not go home and face his wife, Gemma, the woman who had been pulling double shift at the hospital the last few weeks. He could not let her down yet again. He needed to be a man. What kind of husband would he be if he were to let his poor Gemma be the one to provide for them both? She had been putting up with him for the past 34 years. They had hit some rough patches, but she had stuck with him. He needed to get his job back. It's not like anyone was lining up to hire 50-year-old washed-up tech workers without a college degree. This was it. There was no looking for another job. Plus, this was all he knew how to do. This was what he was good at. Maybe he should stop in to see old Mr. Joe down at the tavern. Get a drink, vent a little, get some perspective. Old Joe always knew what to say. After all, he had given Stan such sound advice when he was a young hellraiser, hating the world after his plans to get into the service failed, and again after his folks had died in a head-on collision on a snowy night in mid-January, a few days before his 21st birthday. Then he thought better of that idea. He needed the advice, but that came with drinking, and he always got angry and made a fool of himself after a few drinks. The way he was feeling at that moment, it was better to clear his head without adding anything to impair his judgment. What he needed was a way to get the boss to listen to him, a way to get his job back. He needed him to listen. He could not just give up. He had to come up with a way to get his position at the company back. Going to the only place where he had always found peace, where he was always able to think clearly, Stan climbed to the roof of the tech company building. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered on the ground beneath the 4 stories under him. Mr. Gerald was among them, waving to Stan, pleading with him not to jump, offering to talk about a new position for him at the company. As the general manager, if that's what he wanted, all Stan had to do was come down. They were all there, every one of them, still grumbling, offering to help him if he would only give them a chance. Then there she was, his Gemma, in the thick of it all, standing in front of the deputy, Sheriff Eli Payne Gold, and the rest of his squad, both hands firmly clamped over her mouth. Then it hit him. Their words finally penetrated his brain. They were all there because they thought he was going to jump. Him, Stanley Michael Joseph Guilford. Fat chance of that ever happening. Calling out to his gemstone, Stan yelled, Honey, I'm coming down and I'm taking you to the tavern in town for dinner tonight. After all, we should celebrate my new position as Techtown's new general manager. The end.